Good mythical afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Ayala with another vlog for you. This is the Russian Revolution, a Mr. Ayala presentation. As always, please make sure that you are writing down your notes, and you can, of course, view this as many times as you need to be successful in my class. There's not a discussion board topic for this one, so please just don't worry about putting it in the doobly-doo, but there may be a quiz on this the day that it is due. Yeah, that would be a hint. So, this is Russian Revolution, a Mr. Ayala presentation. To start off with, we need to look at our objectives or things that we need to know. So the first thing we need to do is, why did the Russians rebel against the Czars? Who were the Bolsheviks and who led the Bolsheviks? Which Czar was overthrown? Who takes over the country after the civil wars? After Lenin dies, who takes over? And what was life under Stalin, the Man of Steel? No, not Superman, more or less the complete opposite. So, first things first, causes of the revolution. So we know that history states, based off our earlier parts of this course, that the Czars resisted any times of change in Russia. So we know that since Ivan the Terrible, when he would run around his oprechkaniki and run around and just kill random people to keep them in line. And they always used force. So this tradition continues up to the 20th century. Rapid industrialization after the Industrial Revolution also showed that the Russian peasants that change was needed. And they started becoming educated because they started reading Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. And these ideas showed that the proletariat would rule. And those are more or less the workers. So instead of having the czars or aristocrat or a president, it will be ran by the proletariat themselves. And the most radical of these Marxists become what we call Bolsheviks. And they were led by a guy named Vladimir Lenin here on the side. Yeah, this little scary dude right over here. Who was then exiled shortly to Germany. So wars and revolts. So yet another cause where all of these wars that all sparked unrest in Russia itself. So you had the Russo-Japanese War in 1800, where Japan would win and more or less show them what's needed. So we have the Japan winning. So Japan wins that area. Russia loses Manchuria and quite a bit of power in the east. Then January 22nd in 1905, they have Bloody Sunday, where all these workers and families, they went to the Tsar's Winter Palace, and they started asking for better working conditions, more freedoms, and an elected legislator. And instead of trying to calm people down and try to reduce tensions, Tsar Nicholas II instead decides to open fire with his troops and kill a whole bunch of protesters. About 200 to 300 were killed, with over 1,000 wounded. So then the last one, we have World War III. My bad. It's number 3, but World War I. And so first thing we know about World War I, that Russia was very unprepared for the war. They weren't mobilizing properly. And if you remember the Schieffelin plan under Germany, they decided to swing to the west for France first because they were faster mobilizing, and then swing to the east and attack Russia. But the thing was, Russia never really was prepared for this war and would be defeated on the battlefield one after another after another. So morale fell. Then the Russian people also feel that the Tsarist family itself falls under the control of a guy named Rasputin, a so-called holy man that brought bad luck upon all of Russia itself. That's him right here with those crazy eyes. So if you actually want to look up someone who's pretty interesting, look up Rasputin. There's some crazy stuff about that dude. Then you have your March Revolution, which began as a local strike at a textile mill, and it would later spread into a general uprising. So slowly but surely, information started to spread that they're all going to start striking against the Tsarist regime. And it got so bad that Tsar Nicholas II had to abdicate or leave his throne. And what's kind of interesting is this is where we get the story of Anastasia and Tsar Nicholas II, and them being more or less gunned down in a basement with their dogs. Then Russia ends up setting up a provisional government, which is just a temporary government, and Soviets, which were groups of people in the area, in small local areas to control their governments, started appearing all over Russia. So they took a lot of these ideas, both from the Renaissance, the Enlightenment under Rousseau and Locke, and also Karl Marx's ideas of communism. And then Lenin, who was exiled in Germany the whole time, returns to Russia, and he begins the second part of this revolution, which we call the Bolshevik Revolution. So the Bolshevik Revolution started in November of 1917, and this is when the Bolshevik workers stormed the provisional government at the Kremlin and overthrow it. Then March of 1919, the Bolshevik government signs the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk to end World War I. I'm sorry, my Russian's horrible right there. And so now the Bolsheviks are, no longer fighting any outside forces, so they're going to concentrate right now on destroying their enemies from within, which they do. Yes, there is a little tiny picture of Putin. Beware, he's watching you. And Lenin, when he becomes dictator, becomes leader, and is worried about the economy. So the very first thing he does, he institutes a new economic policy, which is called NEP, that allowed some capitalism for local businesses only. But the country itself stayed communism. So if you made what the communist government wanted, let's say you need 100 bushels of corn, you mean 105, those 5 extra bushels of corn you can sell in your region only. You can't make a profit, though. And he started reforming politics. So like most other nations during World War I or right around at the end of a revolution, they start using nationalism to unify their country. And he also renamed the Bolsheviks the Communist Party. From there, Russia ends up becoming what was known as the Soviet Union or the USSR. Lenin in 1922 has a stroke, and he starts trying to, and 2 people start competing to become dictator after him, Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. So when Lenin dies in 1928, Stalin becomes dictator, and Trotsky is exiled to Mexico and later will be killed by Stalin and the KGB inside of a shack with, I think, with a hammer. It's kind of disturbing. Then Stalin decides he needs to start maintaining his power, and he's got to figure out how to do that. So the way that he does that is he builds something known as the NKVD, which later becomes known as the KGB, and they use wiretaps, torture, and execution to control their citizens. In 1937, Stalin purges the Communist Party, and they know this as the Great Purge. And this is when he kills a whole bunch of people who help him get power, and he sends them to the Gulag, which is spelled Gulag, or a forced labor camp in Siberia. I do apologize for that little thing on the screen. I can't figure out how to get it to go away. You just got to deal with it. Then Stalin uses propaganda and censorship to start controlling all types of mass media, the newspapers, radio, which is brand new, and later television. And he also starts controlling the education system because he wants to indoctrinate all generation with communist ideals. So if you can actually indoctrinate those generations on what you want them to do and understand, they're more likely to follow you. Because, just like Hitler and everyone else has stated, education is always the bane to any society that is controlled by a dictator. Because the more educated they are, the more they know what is right and what is wrong, and the more likely they're going to try to overthrow that government. If they're not educated or the regime in power does not control the education system, it will collapse. And then Stalin also, under communism, you're not allowed to have religion. So he starts persecuting all the religions in Russia and the Soviet Union, especially the Orthodox Church. And you got to remember that the Orthodox Church has been part of Russia since after the fall of the Mongols in around 1200 CE. So please be aware of that this is a big change. And in modern times, the Orthodox Church also has more power after the fall of the Soviet Union. He also wanted to control the economy, and he used this by using the government, and he used the government to create what we call a command economy, as in the government commanded through these ideas called 5-year plans what should be built at what place and how much should be done. He also did collective farms by forcing farmers off of their small family-owned farms into these large industrial farms. And because of that, a gigantic amount of people died because of a famine and starvation. So Stalin now ends up controlling all aspects of life in the Soviet Union or the USSR. He controls the government, he controls the economy, farming, education, propaganda, and the mass media. And also to make sure that you don't do anything wrong, he would also use the NKVD. So one of the things that's really kind of interesting is when you look at the NKVD, one of the rules under Stalin was that even if you talked with a Westerner, you would be killed because they had to control the people. And we're going to look later when we get to the Cold War how the Soviet Union starts collapsing because of education and the arms race with the United States. Please make sure you have reviewed this and that you wrote your notes so that you can be prepared for the pop quiz that will appear. And as always, don't forget to be